Hello friends, for this lecture we have Professor Payal Nagpal, who teaches English in Janki Devi Memorial College, Delhi University. Professor Payal Nagpal has already done analyses for our enjoyment and for our engagement of the short stories that particularly belong to Europe and France. And her lecture today is about a story that is by Maupassant, a French writer who of course wrote in French, but the story is available to us in the English translation. And Professor Payal Nagpal has many points to make about such a story, because she would be hopefully comparing the story with the writing of the 19th century fiction in France, and that will in fact give us focus about the ideological aspect that is reflected in the story. So let's take up the questions in the story about the narrator, for instance. Who is the narrator, Professor Payal Nagpal, if I may ask? Because there would be definitely comments by the author about the woman, about her behavior. He would be giving interpretations, and so if I understand the story correctly, and if I remember it correctly, then there are very few dialogues in the story, and it's all a kind of presentation, her state of mind, her expectations of the protagonist, female protagonist, that is there. And maybe you could begin your discussion here with that intervention by the author in the short story and interpreting it for us. And at the same time, he's not imposing his views or his things on the character and the kind of problems that the woman faces, and there is a chasm between her thinking and her actual living, and all those things that are related in the context of social criticism, etc. So please give us that view.
So thank you, Professor Prakash. So yes, certainly it's as you said, it's the narration that is more important here. The dialogues are not too many, as is also the case with a lot of other short stories by Maupassant. But again, here the narrator also kind of tells us about her mindset, draws our attention to the social context in which she is placed. It's through the character, it's through the protagonist that we see the way in which she is placed in a specific context. So yes, that is certainly there. And when we look at the point that we had been discussing, for instance, about her distress, it's all pointed out by the narrator. The narrator tells us how unto herself she feels that she is not meant for this kind of a setting, and she should have actually been married elsewhere. So what is it that she aspired for is the question that one needs to ask. And one is directly reminded here of Emma Bovary in Madame Bovary, the novel by Flaubert. And I'd just like to read out a quotation from the story. She thought of silent antechambers hung with oriental tapestry, illumined by tall bronze candelabra, and of two great footmen in knee breeches who sleep in the big armchairs, made drowsy by the oppressive heat of the stove. And she thought of long reception halls hung with ancient silk, dainty cabinets, priceless curiosities, perfumed reception rooms, and it goes on in this style. So something that all women envy and whose attention they all desire. So here we see that she feels that she should be a part of the social rung in which, and this is as rightly discussed earlier, it's not only about a kind of social mobility, but it's also a kind of romantic melancholia that places on her the pressure, in a sense, of one were to just think about how young girls are bred, in a sense, brought up with the Cinderella story. So one looks for that kind of thing, and similarly over here, one can imagine, and comparing it with other writings from this period, that this is the kind of mindset that is there of the woman in the 19th century, where she, especially with her beautiful looks, she wants to be part of, the beauty in a sense of, the illusory beauty in a sense of the upper crust. And one also can connect it with the political changes, rapid political changes in a sense in the 19th century in France, because so many series of revolutions that keep taking place. So from 1850 to 1830, 1848 and so on. So we see that there is a kind of leftover of the aristocracy that the bourgeois class is actually facing the pressure of. So and that is quite evident here. In contrast, again one is reminded of exactly the same moment where Emma is sitting and having dinner with Charles Bovary, and here too we see, and this is again I quote from the story, when she sat down to dinner before the round table, covered with a tablecloth in use 3 days, opposite her husband, who uncovered the soup tureen and declared with a delighted air, "Ah, the good soup! I don't know anything better than that." She thought of dainty dinners and of shining silverware. So her immediate context is totally divorced from what she's in her mind imagining her life to be, and her desire as is an outcome of this kind of pressure of the leftover, in a sense, of the grand aristocratic setup that was there earlier. So Mathilde is dejected to see that her immediate context is, really speaking, not as grand as she would want it to be. Again here, Professor Prakash, how do you look at, especially when one compares this with Emma and Madame Bovary?
No, actually, as you rightly point out, there is a great similarity between the two, and the difference would be only of the style. This person is more precise, and Flaubert is more spread out, in terms of the social landscape. But the character is quite similar, and the frustration, the sense of defeat, the sense of disappointment, that also is shared by the two characters in Madame Bovary and in this one. So that's quite clear. And you also point out the gap between her imagination and her reality, and she is looking witheringly at her husband when he pays a compliment, and she is looking elsewhere. Where she is looking, that you point out, but then does she know that this is a kind of gap in her own understanding, in her own gaze, and that is where the writer's intervention is very important. The writer is telling us through the story that this woman is not happy, and this woman doesn't accept the situation in which she is placed. So that is the crux of the story, and I think it has been caused, as you have hinted earlier, it has been caused by the compulsion imposed on her to marry this man.
Yes, and it's true that in fact we all know what the story is all about, and I think as writer, Maupassant preserves the innocence that Mathilde has, and if she had been conscious of it, probably that would not be there. So the narrator shares this information with the reader and lets the reader know that this is how she's thinking. Unto herself, whether she really thinks she's aware of this particular gap or not is a different thing altogether. So in the story then, as it progresses, the husband receives an invitation, manages to actually procure an invitation from the Minister of Public Instruction, and she finally has to go for this very beautiful ball, but instead of actually being happy about it, she's very upset because she does not have a proper dress to wear to this particular evening ball, and neither does she have any jewelry. So she says that only I have no gown and I can't go to this ball. Give your card to some colleague whose wife is better equipped than I am. And the husband, he says that she can buy a dress, and how much money would she require? So he has saved some money for a gun, and it's a very interesting small bit of detailing that is, I think, left here. And one can of course enter the story from this point of view also. But she says that, you know, she would need about 400 francs, and she buys a beautiful dress and is still not happy because there's no jewelry to go with it. And she says that she shall look, she says, poverty stricken. I would almost rather not go at all. So this also, of course, points to the wide gap that has now, you know, emerged between the different segments of the society. So where the husband tells her to wear natural flowers and so on, she says that, well, there is nothing more humiliating than to look poor among other women who are rich. So there is this consciousness that is there, and so she decides to, as advised by the husband, she decides to approach a friend of hers, Madame Forestier, and she borrows a very beautiful diamond necklace placed in a black satin box, and she feels that, you know, this is perfect. And again, we have a moment in this story which takes us back to Madame Bovary, when she goes for this ball to Wabizard, and she dances with the Viscount over there, the Viscount over there. So similarly over here, she's absolutely looking beautiful, and she, you know, all the men are looking at her. To quote from the story, all the men looked at her, asked her name, sought to be introduced. All the attaches of the cabinet wished to waltz with her. She was remarked by the minister himself. So, you know, she's got her moment in established high society, and she's extremely happy and joyous about it. And then, you know, comes the moment of reality of, you know, getting back to her modest world. So the moment her husband, you know, kind of throws, it's cold, so he kind of puts a wrap around her, and that is in a complete contrast with the dress that she is wearing. So it's a reminder of the real world to which she is to go back to. And they don't find a cab, and they are walking, and finally, once they reach home, she realizes that the necklace is missing. And then begins first the hunt for a similar necklace, and then 10 years of drudgery. 10 years of drudgery.
If I may interrupt at this point, Professor Payal Nagpal, the story is not very long. I think in terms of pages it would be 10, 12 pages.
Less than that, much less than that.
And this particular part that you have covered, this is 2 pages, 3 pages. What is it? And if you have any
now we are pretty much towards the last part of the story.
So it's just 3, 4 pages.
Yes.
And there are a few more pages left.
No, this is about it. The story is not very long.
It's not very long after this.
Yes.
So which means that a major part of the story is covered in terms of the party that she has attended and the attention that she has drawn to her looks and all.
Yes.
And that is a kind of you know, picture against which the latter part of the story would be presented.
Well, as I said, that it is unto herself. She is not wisely conscious of this gap that we've been talking about. It's more the narratorial comment, as you point out. And if we were to look at it in terms of the different divisions, I think we could look at it in 4 parts, where the first describes this marriage. The second part would be about the buying and realizing that she needs this dress, and then moving to you know, the ball and Madame Forestier. And the final part, which we are just going to discuss, is going to be about this life of drudgery, and when she meets her friend Madame Forestier after 10 years. And
so all reality of society is packed into 1 or 2 pages.
Yes.
And immediately
Yes.
she'll fall, you know, as a third kind of a thing.
And that is a very remarkable aspect of Maupassant's story, because if you look at other stories also, like there's a story, in fact, that I want to bring in because it's also very similar. It's about jewels again. So it's called The Fake Gems. And it forms a very interesting parallel, a very different one though, to this story. and a story like A Wedding Gift. So there is a turn at the end of the story. And
that is the
Maupassant
famous
leaves
Maupassant
us.
turn.
That's the famous Maupassant turn.
Yes,
and
yes.
Maupassant leaves us at that. After that, the writer is not going to speak. It's like that. He's not going to write. So, here we begin with, when both of them are actually dealing with the cold, and they realize that the necklace is no longer there. So after this, what begins is a life of complete drudgery, because this necklace runs into something like 40,000 francs is what they think as they go to different dwellers. And he compromised, the husband compromised the rest of his life, signing a note without knowing whether he could meet it, and so on. But this also tells us something else. One is the life of drudgery that this couple has to lead, but it also tells us about the way the society is changing. The money lender, again, in all these novels is very important, whether we look at a Balzacian novel or we look at Flaubert. In Maupassant, again, he borrows money and then there is interest to be paid. So this kind of thing, the way there are people now who are money lenders, and they've always been there, but they start acquiring a very prominent role, I think, in the 19th century. And 10 years, and maybe the best 10 years of their life, they have to just, Matilde has to do odd jobs and almost suffer physically, morally, to get these, 36,000 francs. So she, of course, buys it and returns it, and Madame Forestier's that one statement that when she says that, well, you should have returned it sooner, I might have needed it, almost is very threatening. And Mathilde Loisel feels that, she feels guilty for having lost that necklace, and she doesn't have the courage to tell her friend that, and she's happy that she doesn't open the case. So, and these lines are very important here, where Madame Loisel says that, the narrator tells us that Madame Loisel knew the horrible existence of the needy. She bore her part with sudden heroism. That dreadful debt must be paid. So it's a matter of, it's her own self-respect now, and she has to repay this debt. So they dismiss the servant, they change their lodgings, and all sorts of housework and kitchen work and everything she does. So when she finally, and we reach the end of the story now, when she finally meets Madame Forestier after 10 years, she started looking old now, and she started looking very impoverished, and Madame Forestier cannot recognize her, and she has to remind her that she is Mathilde. And then comes the famous Maupassant turn, where she says, "Oh, my poor Mathilde, why, my necklace was paste. It was worth at most only 500 francs. So here, I think, and that's where the story ends. So this, I think, just totally, kind of devastates. It's almost like a shock, and this is also tragic in a sense. And nowhere the whole story is written in a manner that one only feels sorry for this a moment in Mathilde's life, and it's a tragic moment in her life, where the couple has spent 10 years toiling hard so that the debt can be paid. And this is what the diamond necklace is, the necklace actually, story is all about.
The point you made in the beginning, that it's a market-oriented world, that is proved now, that she made a mistake, and then the noose of the market tightened and tightened to squeeze the life out of her.
To squeeze the life out of her.
And Maupassant takes just a few sentences to say this, but in fact he has shown that this is what is coming in the story all the time. The story is so taut, so very fast, tracked, and then suddenly there is an issue.
I think when finally Madame Forestier says that it's all paste, I think what Maupassant is saying here is that this market is false. What appears real here is actually false. And
but what about the hollowness of the rich?
The complete, I think
They are just showing off that they are rich, but even that, madam, has a fake thing.
it's fake, and I think the hypocrisies of the rich.
Yes.
I think in that one line where she says that the necklace was paste, I think it's not the necklace, it's she herself, and the class that she represents. That is fake, as is the market. And as mentioned earlier, there's another very interesting story, that could kind of go along with this one. Its title, False Gems. And here too, we have a clerk, Mr. Lanton, whose wife, is extremely beautiful. She's extremely efficient, and her only passion is buying imitation jewelry. And she keeps, whatever money she gets, she likes going to the theatre, and she keeps buying imitation jewelry, and manages the house so well that they're always able to save a lot of money. Now she suddenly dies, and she dies of pneumonia, and now Mr. Lanton is unable to manage his household. So she had managed with such great efficiency that he's not able to match up to it, and he's not able to save anything either, and so much so that he reaches a point where there is no money in the house. So he suddenly realizes about the box that his wife had, and he picks up a pearl necklace, and he goes to the jeweler, and the jeweler says that this is not fake, it is real. And so he suddenly, he then goes to another person. He thinks that maybe the jeweler didn't quite understand it, and he too, he says that, well, this necklace was bought from this very shop, and he tells Mr. Lanton that, well, this is real, and he says that, let me confirm everything. So he confirms the address. The address is Mr. Lanton's. So it seems that all this while she had been buying all this jewelry. There are so many ways of reading this story. Now the story doesn't end here. The story is not only about the real jewelry that she had bought, but it ends on a very interesting note, which is that at the end of the story, when he finally realizes that he's now inherited a lot of money, many 100,000 francs that he's received through her jewelry, he goes and resigns from his job, and he marries a second time. So the last line here is, 6 months afterward he married again. His second wife was a very virtuous woman, but had a violent temper. She caused him much sorrow. So this is where the story ends. And here, whether the real gems are a reflection of his first wife and the genuine
hypocrisy of a different kind,
and maybe his hypocrisy, but maybe she was quite genuine and managed everything beautifully. Did she have a legacy? And if she did, then she did not want to certainly share it. So a lot of things there that can be read into this story. So I thought that it would be interesting to and here, of course, the two are very, very different in terms of their tone, and in terms of especially the fact that the necklace as a story retains Mathilde's innocence, I think, right to the end. And that is a very commendable fact. And nowhere does the narrator, despite the kind of mindset that he's explaining, he never blames Mathilde for it, and neither does he pass any kind of judgment, nor does the author or the narrator push the reader to judge Mathilde. So,
because in both the stories, you have talked about the woman character. So can something general be said about the writer's presentation of women in France at that time?
I think here we are. There are two aspects again here to this. One is that with a woman like Mathilde, we see the kind of pressures that there are on the women of that particular, social section, and at the same time, I think he sees the women as positive, and I think he's more critical here of the market.
Of the market.
I think he's not placing the responsibility of what happens on Mathilde. It is the market that he's
but the women are very gritty, and they can manage their life with courage and with sense of value, which are fake, of course, but then these women have the creativity to adjust to the circumstances of the market.
In fact, if one compares Madame Forestier to Mathilde Loisel, what we see is that she has courage.
Yes.
She has dignity, because whatever she might have done, you know, in the sense that, you know, she borrowed the necklace, she lost it, but she also wants to pay off the debt. She does not leave it to her husband to do so. She also performs odd jobs, and so much so that by the end of 10 years, she's looking like a very old woman. On the other hand, the ease with which Madame Forestier says what she does, I think shows how shallow, you know, she is. So I think it is looking at that particular society is what Maupassant is doing here.
And in the context of the second story also, the woman was very consistent in her respect for and regard for the husband.
Yes.
And she left all this, and she never told him that this was so. So once again there is a kind of dignity that is involved in the second woman, and at the dignity level the two characters mingle.
Absolutely mingle. In fact, in the second story, the way in which she manages, the narrators always all praise for the way in which she manages the household. So much so that when she finally dies, the husband is just unable to manage anything at all. So how much of you know, she kind of her own human labor that she invests in the running of the household, I think that is something important here.
So even though these stories of Maupassant are social realism of that kind, that he doesn't, you know, give any kind of appreciation to the market, but then women, you know, are able to face the challenge of the market in their own way and in their own terms, and that is where the power of the women lies.
Certainly. And in fact, if we look at both these stories, the men are pretty much, you know, they're in the background, so to say. And these are ordinary men, they lead ordinary lives, both of them are clerks. But it is the women who are really speaking in the forefront, and they are the ones who have agency in both the stories. They are the ones who are performing the action, really speaking. But I think, like other writings that belong to social realism, here too we actually see how Maupassant brings French society, Parisian society into his writing, and tells us the kind of changes that were taking place in the 19th century.
So friends, Professor Payal Nagpal has presented the fate of women as you know, being gritty and determined in their behavior in the 19th century context, and that you know, it's a comment also on the kind of you know, gap that was increasing between those who were supposed to be the drivers of the society and those others who bore the brunt of the problems and crises. And he is, that is Maupassant, is at that time the witness to this kind of gap that is further increasing, and his tone is becoming almost cynical, because he doesn't see any hope in this kind of a world, and perhaps he compels his readers to look for help elsewhere, as these women are doing. They don't see the help, you know, coming within the precincts of the family, but outside, and there's no outside. That is absolutely dark. So I think Professor Payal Nagpal has given us wonderful insights into the Maupassant story in general, and in these two stories in particular. And I'm sure that this will set us thinking about the kind of crisis that you know, afflicts the society of the 19th century France, and the writers in fact start a trend that will finally become popular all over Europe, if not even beyond that.
Yes.
Thank you.